The crack of gunfire echoed across the plains as Grace Zimmerman's carriage rattled to a halt, her heart pounding against her corset like a caged bird desperate for freedom. Montana Territory, 1878, was no place for a lady of her standing to be stranded, yet here she was, staring into the determined eyes of a band of road agents with nothing but her wits and the trembling driver to protect her. "Please," Grace pleaded, clutching her reticule tightly, the diamond engagement ring inside weighing heavily like her future. "I have a schedule to keep. Your fiancé ain't here, madam," sneered the leader, reaching for the carriage door. A thunderous hoofbeat interrupted the standoff, and dust swirled as a lone rider appeared on the horizon, silhouetted against the setting sun. The bandits hesitated, squinting at the approaching figure. "Trouble seems to follow you fine folks today," called a deep voice as the stranger drew closer, his stallion snorting and pawing the ground. His face was partially hidden beneath the brim of a worn leather hat, but Grace could see the hard line of his jaw, weathered by sun and wind. "This ain't your business, cowboy," the lead bandit spat, his hand hovering near his pistol. The stranger dismounted with effortless grace, revealing a tall frame clothed in dust-covered denim and leather. "I'm making it my business." His eyes flicked to Grace, and something flickered in their depths. "Name's Isaac Sutton, madam, and I don't take kindly to seeing a lady harassed." Grace had never witnessed such a swift exchange of gunfire. Before she could draw a proper breath, 3 of the bandits were clutching various wounds, and the others were scrambling for their horses, cursing as they retreated into the distance. Isaac Sutton holstered his pistol and approached the carriage, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that seemed at odds with the violence he'd just enacted. "You all right, madam?" Grace nodded, unable to find her voice as she took in the full sight of him: tanned skin, dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and eyes the color of the Montana sky after a storm. "I'm Grace Zimmerman. I'm indebted to you, Mr. Sutton. No debt necessary." He glanced at the broken wheel of her carriage. "But you won't be making it to Silver Creek tonight. My ranch is just over that ridge. I can offer you shelter until your driver can fix this mess." "Silver Creek?" Isaac's eyebrow arched. "That's Hartwell territory." Grace swallowed hard. "Yes. I'm to marry Edward Hartwell in 2 weeks' time." Something crossed Isaac's face, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even regret, before he schooled his features back to neutral. "Congratulations," he said, though the word seemed to catch in his throat. "Let's get you somewhere safe for the night. Tomorrow's soon enough to worry about Hartwell's." The journey to Isaac's ranch was short but revelatory. Grace had never ridden astride a horse, always proper in carriages or side saddle, but circumstances forced her to accept Isaac's offer to ride double with him. The intimacy of being pressed against his back, her arms encircling his waist, sent unfamiliar thrills through her body. "Your driver can follow with my horse," Isaac had said, helping her mount behind him. "Hold tight, Miss Zimmerman." As they crested the ridge, Grace gasped at the sight before her. The Sutton Ranch sprawled across a verdant valley, cattle dotting the landscape like scattered chess pieces. A modest but well-maintained house stood proudly amid cottonwood trees, smoke curling from the chimney. "It's beautiful," she whispered, her breath warm against his shoulder. "It's home," he replied simply, but she caught the pride in his voice. Inside, the ranch house was unexpectedly refined. Polished wooden floors, a piano in the corner, bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes. Not the rough bachelor quarters she had anticipated. "My mother insisted on certain comforts," Isaac explained, noticing her surprise. "Said just because we live on the frontier doesn't mean we need to live like savages. She sounds like a wise woman. She was." His smile held a gentle sadness. "Died 2 winters ago, fever." "I'm sorry." Grace removed her gloves, feeling the warmth of the hearth Isaac was stoking. "My mother passed when I was 16. Father sent me east to finishing school after that. I've only just returned to Montana. To marry Hartwell, it wasn't a question." Grace nodded, twisting her hands in her lap. "A business arrangement, really. Father's railroad investments need Hartwell's banking connections." Isaac's jaw tightened as he stood, dusting his hands. And what does Grace Zimmerman need? The question startled her. No one had asked her that before, not her father, certainly not Edward Hartwell with his cold eyes and calculated courtship. I don't know, she admitted, finding honesty easier with this stranger than with those who claimed to care for her. Well, while you're figuring that out, let me show you to a room where you can rest. My housekeeper, Mrs. Fletcher, will be by shortly with some fresh clothes. They'll be plain but clean. Later that evening, dressed in a borrowed cotton dress that was simpler than anything she'd worn in years, Grace joined Isaac for a dinner that surprised her with its quality. "You cook?" she asked, savoring a bite of perfectly roasted venison. Isaac laughed, the sound warming the space between them. "Mrs. Fletcher comes by daily. She leaves meals prepared, among other things. I can cook if pressed, but nobody would thank me for it. You live here alone?" The question slipped out before propriety could catch it. "Just me and about 2,000 head of cattle," he confirmed, "and a dozen cowboys who live in the bunkhouse." He studied her for a moment. "You seem surprised. It's just, you're different than I expected." "A man who reads Shakespeare and plays piano," she nodded toward the sheet music visible on the instrument, "isn't the typical Montana rancher. And a woman who notices such things isn't the typical Eastern debutante." His smile reached his eyes this time. "We all contain multitudes, Miss Zimmerman." As the evening progressed, Grace found herself sharing stories of her time in Boston, the stifling propriety, her secret love of astronomy that had scandalized her instructors. Isaac, in turn, told her of his journey west after the war, building his ranch from nothing, his dreams of expanding into the valley currently Hartwell land. "That's where the trouble started," he admitted, refilling her tea cup. "Edward's father, Harold Hartwell, doesn't appreciate competition. He's been trying to drive small ranchers out for years." Grace frowned. "Edward never mentioned this. Would he? The Hartwells prefer their brides ignorant of business matters." Isaac's tone was bitter. "No offense intended, none taken. It's unfortunately accurate." Grace set down her cup. "My father says Edward will make a fine husband because he's ambitious." "Ambition without conscience is a dangerous thing, Miss Zimmerman." The night deepened around them, and when Grace finally retired to the guest room, her mind was in turmoil. She'd learned more about the territory's politics in one evening with Isaac Sutton than in months of courtship with Edward. The implications disturbed her sleep. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through curtains that smelled of lavender. For a moment, Grace forgot where she was, stretching luxuriously before reality came crashing back. Today, she would return to Silver Creek, to her waiting fiancé and the future mapped out for her. She found Isaac in the barn, examining her repaired carriage. He straightened at her approach, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "Your driver worked through the night," he said. "You'll be in Silver Creek by noon. Thank you for your hospitality." The words felt inadequate. "Miss Zimmerman, Grace." Isaac stepped closer, hesitated, then continued. "I need to warn you about the Hartwells. Edward is his father's son in every way. The methods they use to expand their empire, they're not always honorable." Grace's spine stiffened. "What exactly are you implying?" "The night raids on small farms, burned-out homesteaders, cattle mysteriously dying after drinking from streams that cross Hartwell land. These aren't coincidences. You have proof of these accusations. Nothing that would stand in court, but everyone knows." Grace struggled with this information, comparing it to the polished, ambitious man who had courted her in Boston. "Why tell me this now?" Isaac's eyes held hers, intensity radiating from him. "Because you deserve to know what kind of man you're marrying, and because," he stopped, looked away. "Because," she prompted, something fluttering in her chest. "Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about how different you are from what I expected. How much I'd like to know more about the woman who reads astronomy books and speaks her mind when she thinks no one's listening." The air between them crackled with something dangerous and thrilling. Grace took a step back, needing distance from the emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "I should go. My father will be worried." Isaac nodded, his expression closing. "Of course." He helped her into the carriage, his touch careful, impersonal. "Safe travels, Miss Zimmerman." As the carriage pulled away, Grace found herself looking back, watching Isaac Sutton's figure grow smaller against the backdrop of his ranch. She told herself the heaviness in her chest was merely gratitude, nothing more. Silver Creek welcomed her with curious stares and whispered conversations. News of her adventure had evidently preceded her. By the time she reached the grand Hartwell mansion on the hill overlooking the town, Edward was waiting on the porch, his expression thunderous. "Where have you been?" he demanded, barely waiting for the carriage to stop. "Your father and I have been beside ourselves." "The carriage broke down," Grace explained, allowing him to help her down. "We were fortunate that Mr. Sutton happened by and offered assistance." Edward's grip on her arm tightened painfully. "Sutton, Isaac Sutton, yes, do you know him?" "That man is a troublemaker and a thief," Edward hissed, leading her inside. "He's been trying to undermine my family's business for years." "He seemed honorable to me," Grace said, pulling her arm free, "and his hospitality was impeccable." Edward's face darkened. "I don't want you anywhere near that man again. Do you understand? As my wife, you'll have certain standards to uphold." "I'm not your wife yet," Grace replied, surprising herself with her boldness. For a moment, Edward looked as though he might strike her. Instead, he forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Of course not, my dear. The ceremony is still 2 weeks away. Speaking of which, your dress arrived from San Francisco yesterday. Perhaps you'd like to rest before trying it on." Grace nodded, grateful for the reprieve. In her assigned bedroom in the Hartwell mansion, she sank onto the edge of the bed, her mind racing. Everything about Silver Creek felt wrong, suddenly too constraining, too calculated. Even the air seemed harder to breathe. From her window, she could see the town sprawling below, and beyond it, the open country where Isaac's ranch lay. The memory of his honest eyes, the warmth of his home, the way he'd spoken to her as an equal, all of it, contrasted sharply with Edward's controlling manner. "This is madness," she whispered to herself. "One night in a stranger's home doesn't erase years of planning." Yet as the days passed, Grace found herself increasingly troubled by the disparity between Edward's public and private faces. In town, he was the charming banker, generous with loans to businesses he favored, ruthless with those he didn't. At home, his coldness extended to casual cruelty toward servants and condescension toward Grace herself. A week before the wedding, Grace ventured into town alone, ostensibly to finalize details with the florist. Instead, she found herself drawn to the small newspaper office where the Silver Creek Sentinel operated. The editor, a woman named Martha Dawson, looked up in surprise when Grace entered. "Miss Zimmerman, what an unexpected pleasure, Miss Dawson. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, though I'm surprised to see you here without an escort." Grace smiled tightly. "I find I breathe easier without supervision. May I ask you something candidly?" Martha gestured to a chair. "Please do. Candor is my stock in trade, though it's rarely appreciated in this town. Tell me about the Hartwells." Grace leaned forward. "The real story, not the one they prefer to circulate." Martha studied her for a long moment. "That's a dangerous line of inquiry for a woman about to join the family." Nevertheless, the editor sighed, then pulled out a drawer full of articles, some published, many not. "Harold Hartwell arrived here 20 years ago with money from back east. Nobody asked too many questions about its source. He bought land, built that bank, and started squeezing. Small ranchers found their loans called in during drought years. Mysterious fires plagued those who resisted selling. And Edward learned at his father's knee. He's smarter about it, leaves fewer traces, but the results are the same." Grace's stomach churned. "What about Isaac Sutton? Edward calls him a troublemaker." Martha's expression softened. "Isaac came here after the war with nothing but determination, built that ranch through honest work. He's organized the small ranchers into a cooperative that stands against Hartwell's monopoly. That's his real crime. Has he ever broken the law? Never, though not for lack of provocation." Martha leaned back. "May I ask why you're inquiring about a man your fiancé considers an enemy?" Grace stood, smoothing her skirts. "Just trying to understand the landscape I'm marrying into." A wise precaution. Martha hesitated, then added, "The wedding's in a week. If you need anything at all, my door is open." The offer lingered in Grace's mind as she walked through town. Without conscious decision, her feet carried her toward the livery stable where she impulsively rented a horse and rode out of town, heading in the direction of Isaac's ranch. She wasn't sure what she expected to find there, or what she would say if she saw him. But the need to see him again, to hear his voice, had become overwhelming. As she approached the ridge overlooking his property, she reined in sharply. Below, Isaac's barn was in flames, cowboys racing to and fro with buckets. A group of masked riders was disappearing into the distance. Without thinking, Grace spurred her horse down the slope, arriving breathless and soot-stained as the ranch hands finally brought the fire under control. "Miss Zimmerman," Isaac emerged from the smoke, face blackened, shirt torn. "What in God's name are you doing here?" "I saw the fire from the ridge," she explained, dismounting. "Who did this?" Isaac's expression hardened. "Who do you think? Edward wouldn't he? This is the third time this month. Usually it's fences cut or cattle scattered. This time they escalated." He gestured to the smoldering barn. "No one was hurt, thank God, but the message is clear." "What message? Sell or suffer?" Isaac wiped his face with a bandana, leaving streaks across his skin. "Your future father-in-law sent a formal offer yesterday, insultingly low price, of course." "I had no idea." Grace felt sick. Isaac's eyes softened as he took in her distress. "Why are you here, Grace? Really? I don't know," she admitted. "I've been trying to understand everything, the Hartwells, this town, my place in it. And have you? I'm beginning to." She looked around at the damage, the weary cowboys, the stark reality of the conflict she was marrying into. "This isn't right." "No, it isn't." Isaac stepped closer. "Grace, I know it's not my place, but I have to ask, are you sure about this marriage?" Before she could answer, hoofbeats approached and Edward Hartwell himself appeared, flanked by two men with rifles. His eyes narrowed dangerously as he took in the scene. "So this is where you disappeared to," he said, voice glacial. "Consorting with my enemies behind my back." "I saw the fire and came to help," Grace replied, lifting her chin, "as any decent person would." "Get on your horse," Edward ordered. "We're leaving." "Don't speak to her like that," Isaac said, stepping forward. Edward's laugh was ugly. "I'll speak to my fiancée however I please, Sutton. And after we're married, she won't be allowed within 10 miles of this worthless patch of dirt." "Is that what this is about?" Grace asked, sudden clarity washing over her. "The land, of course it's about the land," Edward snapped. "Sutton's ranch sits on the only viable route for the railroad spur my father and yours have been planning. He refuses to sell, so he'll be persuaded by other means." "Your father promised the railroad would follow the eastern route," Grace said, remembering conversations overheard in her father's study. "The one that doesn't cross any existing ranches. Plans change." Edward dismounted, reaching for her arm. "Now come along before you completely disgrace yourself." Grace pulled away. "The men who set the fire, they work for you, don't they?" Edward's silence was confirmation enough. "I can't marry you," Grace said, the words bringing immediate relief. "I won't be part of this." Edward's face contorted with rage. "You think you have a choice? Your father signed the marriage contract. The merger of our companies depends on it. You belong to me." "She belongs to herself," Isaac said quietly, stepping between them, "and she's made her choice." "Stay out of this, Sutton," Edward snarled, hand moving to his gun. "This doesn't concern you. I'm making it my concern." Isaac didn't reach for his own weapon. "Miss Zimmerman is under my protection as long as she chooses to be." Edward drew his pistol. "I've waited a long time for an excuse to put you down, Sutton." "No." Grace moved forward, but Isaac gently pushed her behind him. "Think carefully, Hartwell," Isaac said. "Shooting an unarmed man in front of witnesses isn't something even your father's money can erase." For a tense moment, Edward seemed poised to fire anyway. Then, with a curse, he holstered his gun. "This isn't over. Father will speak to Judge Patterson. We'll have a writ for breach of contract by morning." He pointed at Grace. "And your reputation will be in tatters. No decent home in the territory will welcome you." "Then I'll find an indecent one," Grace replied, heart pounding with newfound courage, "but it will be my choice." Edward spat on the ground, then remounted. "You'll regret this, both of you." With that, he and his men rode away, dust billowing in their wake. In the silence that followed, Grace felt both terror and exhilaration. "I just destroyed my future," she whispered. Isaac turned to her, eyes serious. "Or claimed it for yourself. My father will disown me, possibly." "I have nowhere to go." Isaac hesitated, then took her hands in his. "That's not strictly true. My home isn't much compared to what you're used to, but there's always a place for you here if you want it." "As what?" Grace asked, barely daring to breathe. "Your housekeeper." "As whatever you want to be," he answered softly, "for as long as you want to stay." The days that followed tested Grace's resolve in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her father arrived in Silver Creek, furious and bewildered by her decision. The Hartwells initiated legal proceedings, claiming breach of contract and significant financial damages. "They'll take everything," her father warned during a tense meeting at Martha Dawson's office, which had become neutral ground. "The investments, the railroad shares, even our home back east." "Then we'll start again," Grace said, surprising herself with her determination. "But I won't marry a man who burns people's homes to get what he wants." Her father's face softened slightly. "You really believe Sutton is worth this sacrifice?" "This isn't about Isaac," Grace insisted, though her heart quickened at the thought of him. "It's about not closing my eyes to injustice because it's convenient." In the end, it was Martha who found the solution. Digging through county records, she discovered irregularities in how the Hartwells had acquired certain properties, including the land where they planned to route the railroad spur. "These deeds were altered after filing," she explained, spreading documents across her desk. "The original homesteaders were forced out, but the legal transfers were never properly completed. If this came to light in court, Harold Hartwell would face prison," Grace's father finished, eyes widening. "This changes everything." Armed with this leverage, they negotiated a settlement. The Hartwells would withdraw their suit, and in exchange, Grace's father would not expose their fraudulent land dealings. The railroad would follow the eastern route as originally planned, and Isaac's ranch would remain untouched. "It's not perfect justice," Martha admitted after the papers were signed. "The Hartwells keep most of their ill-gotten gains, but they've lost their stranglehold on the territory's future." "And I've kept my daughter," Grace's father added, embracing her for the first time since the scandal broke. "Though I still don't understand why you couldn't have brought these concerns to me before causing such a spectacle." "Would you have listened?" Grace asked gently. His silence was answer enough. When the dust settled, Grace found herself at a crossroads. Her reputation in society circles was indeed damaged, though not beyond repair. Her father had reconciled himself to the broken engagement and offered to take her back east where the scandal would eventually fade. "And if I choose to stay?" she asked him. He sighed, looking older than his years. "Then I hope this Sutton fellow is worthy of you." On a crisp autumn morning, Grace rode to Isaac's ranch alone, her future unwritten for the first time in her life. She found him mending a fence, shirt sleeves rolled up, hat tipped back as he worked in the gentle sunlight. He straightened when he saw her, his smile cautious but warm. "Miss Zimmerman, I heard the good news about the settlement. Yes, the railroad will follow the eastern route as planned, your land is safe, and you're free of your obligation to the Hartwells." Grace dismounted, tying her horse beside his. "Free to choose my own path." "And what path might that be?" Isaac asked, setting down his tools. "I'm not entirely sure yet." She moved closer, drawing courage from the hope in his eyes. "But I know I don't want to leave Montana." "Any particular reason?" "Several," she said, smiling. "The mountains, the sky, a certain ranch with good books and a piano that needs playing." Isaac took a step toward her, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes. "Grace, I have nothing to offer that compares to what you're giving up." "You're wrong," she said simply. "You offer honesty, integrity, and a home built on something real. That's worth more than all the Hartwell wealth. I can't promise it will be easy. I don't want easy." Grace reached for his hand. "I want true." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before, both familiar and thrillingly new. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as the Montana wind swept around them, carrying the scent of sage and promise. They married the following spring in Martha Dawson's garden, with Grace's father giving her away and the small ranchers of the valley bearing witness. Edward Hartwell and his father had departed for San Francisco, their influence in the territory diminished, but their fortune largely intact. Not perfect justice, Isaac agreed when Grace mentioned this during their wedding dance, but we'll build something better in their wake, and they did. Over the years, the Sutton Ranch flourished, expanding not through intimidation but through hard work and fair dealings. Grace established a school that welcomed children from all backgrounds, teaching astronomy alongside reading and writing. Her father, gradually won over by his son-in-law's character and business acumen, invested in their ventures, creating opportunities throughout the valley. On their 5th anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, their 3-year-old daughter asleep in Isaac's arms and another child growing beneath Grace's heart, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. "You ever regret it?" Isaac asked, reading her thoughts as he often did. "The life you might have had," Grace took his hand, the same hand that had reached for hers when she needed courage, that had built their home, that cradled their children with infinite tenderness. "Not for a single moment," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As darkness fell, stars emerged above the valley that was theirs not by force or manipulation, but by choice and perseverance. Grace leaned against her husband's shoulder, content in the knowledge that sometimes the hardest paths led to the truest destinations, and that love, when fought for, built foundations stronger than any fortune could buy.